Thanks for joining us for this edition of our Five Smooth Stones podcast. And we're with Jan Kraushaar, who was with us last week. And this is our second interview in a series of 5. And today we're talking about maybe my favorite subject and what's become a signature characteristic of children's ministry work that Every Generation Ministries has advocated around the world. And it's the idea of teaching experientially, where kids don't just hear the Bible teaching, they actually experience what you're teaching them and engage them in a more heartfelt, emotional way. It's super effective. So, Jan, when you, I know you love experiential teaching too. We love creating activities and using them is so awesome because you see how it affects kids and stuff. So when you think about experiential activities in Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 through 9, well, what comes to mind to you as a experiential activity that's meant a lot to you?
Well, first, I really feel like we should look right at Jesus because he was the master of experiential activities. Mm-hmm. So for example, the wedding in Cana, he asked the servants to fill the water jugs with water, and then he transformed it to wine. And when he fed the 5,000, he asked the disciples first to find some food for all the multitudes, and they got frustrated and upset and worried, and then he allowed them to serve the 2 little fish and 5 loaves of bread to thousands of people.
And then says, I'm the bread of life, right?
Exactly. And then he let them participate in picking up the leftover baskets that were still filled with bread.
Right.
And then when he asked Peter to climb out of the boat and walk to him, Peter experienced both first faith and then fear. So
the night of the storm.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Jesus always was using experiential activities.
That's sort of weird when you think about Peter getting out of the boat. I was thinking of John 21, where he jumps out of the boat when he thinks it's Jesus and wades on. There's a lot of Peter jumping out of the boat stories in the Bible, right?
You have to clarify which one you're talking about.
Okay, and then in The Chosen, it really struck me too when he first meets him and calls him to, in that scene where he tells him to throw the net over on the other side, and when he hauls it up, and of course he thinks, why should I do that? You don't know anything about fishing, and we fished all night and can't catch anything. And then when he hauls it up, and there's that scene of the fish flopping around, and a lot of them, the net's packed.
Yeah, that was amazing.
In the footage, it's so amazing. And Peter's looking up at Jesus, and then Jesus says, I'm going to make you a fisher of men.
Exactly.
So they captured the drama of that experiential activity and the teaching so powerfully in The Chosen. Okay, so Jesus used experiential activities, and we've got lots of stuff on our website about people using experiential activities like Paul and when God calls Moses, the book of Jonah, etc. When you think about children's ministry, and you've been doing children's ministry, we were talking about last week, for 50 years. It's amazing. So you started when you were 3. but anyway, what's a memorable experiential activity that you've used with kids that comes to mind? And we have to warn you now because Jan's she does these elaborate, sometimes elaborate experiential activities. So get ready. This could be awesome.
I'm creative, and it's hard to hone it down to a simple activity for sure. There's so many to choose from that we've done, but the most recent one was when I was teaching the I Am lessons to that group of girls. Yeah. And the lesson was on Lazarus, the raising of Lazarus, and how Jesus transformed him from death to life. And the whole aim of the lesson was transformation. And children aren't going to know what transformation means. So I wanted them to understand that. And
which is why you teach experientially, right? Because how do you cognitively understand that, right?
So we made these little paper flowers out of coffee filters. And that took 2 minutes to make a little paper flower. And then
I bet it would take me longer. Go ahead.
Well, they weren't all put together
I know.
Really special, but I tried it with other media, and the coffee filters worked the best.
Right.
And then I let them dip first into plain water. They dipped the stem of the flower into the plain water, and not much happened. It absorbed the water, and they just were wet, basically. And then with their other paper flower, because each of them made 2, I let them dip the flour into different bowls of colored water from food coloring. And it absorbed the colors, but beautiful colors went up into the petals of the little flower, and that was just, the kids were mesmerized. And there's another one that's really similar.
They experience
the transformation
of the coffee filter flour. Yeah,
the little flour. Yeah. And you can also do
and it looks cool too. I saw the photos of that.
Yeah, you can do it in a little pan of water also, where you pour either milk or cream into the water. And when you do it with plain water, nothing happens. You put the food coloring in, nothing happens. But when you do it with milk or cream, when they drop the drops of food coloring in, it's like a kaleidoscope of color.
Yeah.
And the children are just like so
powerful.
Yeah, it's very powerful.
It's not just talking about it.
Exactly, yeah.
You were going to give you had another example you were thinking?
I was just going to say that you don't have to even be that elaborate. The one we've done for years and years is just the simple one about trusting God, and where you just fall back into the arms of another leader.
Yeah.
So you don't have to use a lot of materials.
Well,
in fact, it's better if you can find an easy one.
I was teaching about the temptations in our church for Lent, and the last one is about idolatry, and where Satan wants him to worship him, and he promises to give him the kingdoms of this world. And so we were teaching about worship, and I think the lesson aim was I can avoid idolatry by worshiping God. So I wanted to do an experiential activity, and this is adults. So I got like an object, and I think we've done this in training for children's workers. I put this object in the middle of the table, and then divided. I think we had like 4 groups or something in our house here, and there's like 5 or 6 people around each object, and you have to go around and describe it. But they like ran out of stuff to say pretty quick. And then the whole point of the teaching was, when we think about worshiping God, sometimes we don't think very much about all the endless qualities that he has, and we kind of shortchange who God is, like that experiential activity where you can only think of 4 or 5 things to say about the item, and we can say hundreds of things about God and should, and not be like that. And it was just such a great way to connect them to the teaching, that simple experiential activity. It is awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've looked at lots of Bible curriculum over the years in the United States and around the world, actually. And it's not something that's really commonly incorporated in a curriculum. And in fact, I don't think I've ever seen a curriculum that like routinely has an experiential activity in their material. So if there's a children's worker listening in, which is probably all of them, that have curriculum they're using in their church of some sort, how can they take the curriculum they have and incorporate an experiential activity into it?
I think the first thing that they need to do, there's a lot of really good curriculums out there, and they have a wealth of really fun and interesting ideas, but a lot of times they're all over the place. They don't really have a specific aim that they're zeroed in on, and so I think look at the aim, hone in on one particular thing that you want to concentrate on, and then I think it takes a few days of prayer and brainstorming and thinking. I think it's important to get together with the other leaders, even your husband or wife in your house, and just brainstorm ideas and come up with something experiential that they can do that's simple, that will hone in on that aim and let that aim
and I think
guide all
the
activities.
aim, you have to think about what are the feelings associated with the aim and create an activity that would stimulate that.
Yeah.
When you've used experiential activities, where do you put them in like the order of the lesson? If you've got, we do it like, I know how EGM does it, but why is it that way? What are your thoughts about that in terms of like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
where do you do it in the order of the lesson?
I think it's great to have it right before the truth time, because it is setting them up to begin to understand what the Bible is saying and what the Holy Spirit wants
What's
to
the educational
teach them.
term they used to use? All the participatory
Yeah.
set or something, where you set them up
Exactly,
for the
the
learning.
participatory set.
Yeah, you're like setting the kids up to learn.
Or the pre-focusing
Yes.
activity.
Yes.
Yeah. But I've done it the other way too, where
After
it's
the
right
teaching?
after the teaching, and I'll tell you about that later. 'Cause
Okay. Well, the thing I like about doing it before the Bible teaching is if you have the activity like the flower activity, when it's not so much true with little kids, like 3, 4, 5-year-olds, but older kids, when you start doing those kinds of activities, they know that you're about to teach something,
Yeah.
and they're trying to figure out what.
Yes.
Like, is this about, God made the flowers or something?
Well, and that's
so
why
that-
the questions, the connecting questions are so
and
important.
you've got them trying to teach themselves.
Yes.
Right? They're trying to learn without you even having open the Bible yet.
Yeah.
So that's why I like it before, is you can really get the kids like trying to learn what you're going to be teaching from the Bible before you even open the Bible.
Well, and then when you ask the connecting questions and then you have a connecting statement that bridges over to the truth time, and then they're really ready to zero in on what you're teaching.
Absolutely. Okay, so every children's worker, when they are leading their children's ministry, they're thinking about wanting to see boys and girls' lives changed and real transformation to become more Christ-like and experience a good life that God has for them and have a children's ministry that has some meaning and impact. I think that's what everybody wants.
Yeah, of course.
So, could you talk about why you think experiential teaching is like a crucial tool that God uses to see that happen? What's the connection there in your mind?
I think that the experiential activity helps children, when they hear the Bible truth, suddenly have this aha moment. And my example of that dates all the way back to I think it was in the 1980s, when I went to a winter camp and I was teaching, it was a snow camp, and I was teaching on how God forgives our sins and purifies us and cleanses us.
White as snow.
White as Snow is the name of the camp. And we were doing this little activity with snow and dirt and pine needles, and I was telling them during the teaching time how sin can be like a snowball rolling down a hill. And when it collects all the dirt and the pine needles and the rocks, it gets down to the bottom of the hill, and it's just a mess of dirt, and it's not pure and white anymore. And I was talking about how God cares about how we live our lives, and that He doesn't want us to have sin compounding on more sin, on
all the
more
junk
sin,
in your life.
all the junk.
Yeah.
He wants us to turn to Him for forgiveness and let Him purify us and make us holier. And this is where the experiential activity kind of happened on the way out, because I had talked about that. I didn't really do it during the teaching time.
Right.
But we were walking back to the cafeteria, and there was a group of boys. They were about 5th or 6th grade. We were walking to go get lunch after the chapel time. And this one big kid, and he had been a problem the whole way, all during he's kind of a pill.
Yes, you have one at every camp, right?
Yeah, but he was walking along, and we had snow the night before that was beautiful and pure and white, but now a day later it was all melted, and he was making a snowball and rolling it down the hill as we walked to the cafeteria, and it was
just what you'd been talking about.
Yeah, and it was collecting pine needles and getting dirty and everything, and he goes, "Mrs. K," and he points to his big, huge snowball that's like this big by now, and he said, I get what you're talking about. And it was like he had that aha moment
from the
experience that he came up with the experiential activity,
right.
but he got the connection between the snowball and sin and God's desire to forgive us and make us pure. And it was just, I just pray that boy now who'd be, he'd be in his 40s.
Right. Teaching his kids that now, maybe.
I pray that he knows the Lord now and is following Him.
Well, as a sidelight, when you're parenting, you don't have to create the activities.
That's true.
They happen, and then it's a way for parents to connect God's Word to that. All right. Well, the big feedback I've heard over the years is it's too hard to create experiential activities because I'm not creative, teachers say. And of course, that's why we started writing curriculum. You have done so much work with our ministry writing materials like that. What do you say to a teacher who says, I can't create an experiential activity because I'm not creative?
Yeah, well, that's quite a few people, and you
Yes.
want those people in children's ministry. But one thing I would do is gather leaders together, and I know that's something that's happening less and less because people are busy.
Right.
But when you gather people together in a room and you have some food and something to drink, and they're fellowshipping together, but you ask them to brainstorm you get the creative people and the non-creative people all talking together, and before you know it, those people
Lots of good ideas.
those people that think they're not creative actually come up with some really great ideas, and God really blesses that time. The other thing I think is really important is to pray. I have had many times where I have thought and thought and thought, and I cannot think of an idea at all. And then I pray, and if you've got the time during the week to pray about the lesson, oftentimes God will just give you an idea that'll work with
and
the
like
kids.
super pragmatically, there's so much stuff now that you can access on the internet in terms of just activities that are like games and activities that you can use
Exactly.
as an experiential activity. They weren't intended for that,
Sure.
but you can use them that way. And then the other thing, I don't know who I heard say this, but they said that we're all made in God's image. God's creative in himself. It's who he is in so many ways. And since we're made in his image, it's really not possible to be non-creative. So even like, I know Jan's husband is a banker and a very, somebody that you wouldn't think is like stereotypically a creative person, but he is. I've seen Kurt do things that are creative. And I think that people cheat themselves into thinking that they're not creative, and maybe they are more than they think so.
Well, yeah.
And when you get those groups together, you see that.
Yeah, and some of my ideas I've used in the curriculum I've been writing have come from my husband.
Exactly.
And he does not like it when I ask him, but I'll say, hey, we have this aim of such and such, and what do you think would be a good experiential activity? And he knows the model pretty thoroughly now.
Right.
And oftentimes he's the one that comes up with a good idea.
Exactly. All right. Well, thanks for joining us for this Five Smooth Stones podcast. So happy to have Jan here with us to talk about experiential teaching. And if you want to learn more about that, you can go on our website at www.egminstitute.org. Thanks for joining us.